Gila, you're mute.
Yofi, okay. Again, shalom, welcome, Shabbat shalom. Welcome.
Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom.
ברוכים הבאים to Temple בית אורה, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. It's nice to have people from all over again. We're going to go into our Limud Torah now after Shacharit. Thank you again for all those who made Minyan possible and joined us. Yael, I'm going to give the floor now to you. You can share what you want. Please tell us a bit about yourself. Yael Kanarek, that I'm pronouncing it, נכון? Kanarek, from New York. Yes, artist. Fascinating work. This is like just one bit of your work that I'm very interested in. So thank you very much for being with us here and joining us and teaching us Torah. So say a few words about yourself, b'vakasha, and then you take us where you want.
I just want to say that, thank you, Gila. And I want to say that actually Gila and I met through another part of my art practice. So it's really a beautiful moment where Toratah and this other project I've worked on for a long time that is in a way a precursor to Toratah, World of Awe, come together for me. So I was born in New York and I was raised in Israel. I'm a secular Israeli, which means that I studied Tanakh in school, not as a spiritual book, but as a kind of history, literature, mythology, really unclear, but definitely deeply connected to the Zionist, program, 100%. Deeply connected with the military service, and that's the settings that I was introduced to. I remember when I was in 3rd grade and we were taught the story of the Garden of Eden and what Eve did. I remember the feeling of disappointment in Eve. I couldn't believe that the boys, when we went out to play, got off the hook on this one. And there started a complicated relationship with the stories, the books, and my relationship to them. So for the longest time, for many, many years, I wanted nothing to do with it at all. And then about a little more than 10 years now came Kabbalah that taught me that there's a spiritual practice within Judaism, a true spiritual practice. And the voice of the feminine is much more pronounced and has a much more pronounced role. So I was like, okay, forget about the rest and let me just focus on that. And what I loved so much about it is the language. I really love the Hebrew, and I really love the biblical Hebrew because it's like an accordion. It's like you can peel it and you can go to the root, and from the root you can find another layer of meaning. And this kind of malleability of the narrative, and it's such a fragmented narrative, and it has so many weird things in it that I absolutely love, really attracted me to it. So I come to this with actually great love for it in its original form. But as I said, I reached this spiritual impasse. And I started doing the unthinkable, right? I'm like everyone else grew up with, like, this is a big no-no. And I remember even the first time I did that, I was looking up and I was like, okay, the sky did not fall. And I just kept going. And as I kept going, more and more things in the language started to reveal themselves. So what I want to do is actually, I'm going to bring you into my digital studio. I want to show you where this thing happens for me, because I work between text and form. Form for me is part of meaning. And so I'm going to show you the pages of the text file. So it starts with the text file, then it goes to the visual. And I'll connect it to our parasha. So this is what, I'm going to share the screen now. I'm going to share this part of the screen now. Okay, so this is the actual file of Bamidbar in Hebrew. And here's the English. The English is just really at the beginning. I arrived in English to Vatikra, Leviticus, and I have 2 more books to do in the English. And so once I have the source material, then I can go into the deeper working of the language. And I'm going to share Illustrator, where this is usually where I think of things in this kind of visual way. And now we're getting into Illustrator. Okay, so this is where it comes to play. And I'm going to start here. As some of you heard, I pronounced the name Tehovah. So I just want to say a couple of things about that. In Hebrew, Yud, the first letter, denotes future tense in male. So Taf would be the future tense in female, the female form. The Hey Vav Hey is the root for being and present moment. So this would be the traditional form right here. And this would be the male form, this would be the female form. And I created basically a new form that doesn't have a sound yet. And it has the Yud inside the Taf. So 2 points of entry that are one into that being present moment state. So I basically created a new name that is really not unpronounceable yet. I mean, we can always create a sound for anything. And Tehovah and Yovah are the split of that. The other reason that I feel that Tehovah is close enough right now comes from Genesis chapter 4, verse 26. And to Toratah, also a daughter was born, and she named her Enoshit. At that time they began to call upon the name Tehovah. Enosh means also human. Enoshit means human in the female form, but it also has the root for Anusha, desperate. And Enoshit is the 4th generation from Chovah. And that's when we start to forget the name. And that's where we start to forget the lineage. The 4th generation starts to feel a little further. And that's where I feel the desperation to call her name. And since we're in this young, very, very young place of Toratah, she feels close, you know. Yud had Vav Hey, there's a very long history, rabbinical history. I mean, it used to be named as well, I think, up to the 2nd temple period. And after that, other more and more language about the relationship and the distance and how we approach the divine evolved over many years. But in the Tova side, we don't even have a rabbinical institution yet. So it's a place that is, on one hand, more open, and the other hand, more barren. It's really the midbar. So that's how I work this. I took it here to the first chapter of Genesis. Here you have the traditional form, and on the right side you have Toratah and Torato. They're both half faces of Torah Shlema. Both sides together become Torah Shlema. Here I expanded the Vav like a windpipe, and the 2 Hays are like the lungs, and it also reads the word present moment. So the breath and the present moment are connected. I want you to see this part. I'm going to zoom in here, because this is really where the critical moment is. And Elohim created the Eve. I changed it to Chovah, and this came later. Chovah, the one who experiences in the present moment, Chovah. in her own image. In the image of Elohim, she created her. Female and male, she created them. And here we have the traditional or the Toratah side. Both of them start to create a more complex, I feel, human or spiritual human for us to relate to. Each side is made, female and male, as qualities, as two hands. Yeah. So that's how I got there. Now I want to bring us to what I did for us here. So we're in Bamidbar, and the beginning of Bamidbar speaks about the creation of the armies, really, and then the arrangement of the armies and the tribes around the tent of meeting, which is also the word moed, oil moed, is also the tent of time. And again, based on the names, can you see this well? Do I need to zoom in? A little bit. How's that? Is this better? Great. Actually, I can probably even go a little bigger. Okay, here we go. So this is what I did here.
Can I just say, Paula is just, she added to what you said, and she said it's like a right and left hemispheres of the brain.
Yes.
I think maybe the drawing, but also the way they
yes.
That's just a beautiful image as well. Thank you, Paula.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paula. It's like 2 ears and 2 eyes and 2 brains and 2 aspects of our, spiritual body. Absolutely. That's why I feel that when Toratah comes to be part of this, we can really experience Torah Shlema, a complete Torah, where everyone is around the table. And I want to say also another thing for for gender fluidity, because this is a question that actually comes very, very often with the younger generation. Hebrew is gender specific. We don't have grammar yet to be fluid, but once you would bring both of these together, we can actually move from one side to another. And I was actually thinking that it would be an amazing to do Aliyah where both Toratah and Toratah are chanted together. So that's, something that would be really amazing to do. Or even, for example, the brachot before can also go back and forth, which can also be really interesting. Going here to the tribes. So I'm putting it up here so you can actually kind of look at it for a while. So I arranged the tribes in their orders around. So, and the names have been feminized. So Dan becomes Dana, and Asher becomes Asherah. Yehuda becomes Tehuda. And following the meaning, and the other interesting thing is it's mostly the fathers who are actually naming the daughters now. And each name comes with, it has a purpose to it, has a meaning to it. Naphtali represents the struggle towards the struggle for Naphtali struggles with her sister, and she overcomes. So through the prayer, the power of prayer. Tehuda is the praise, giving thanks. So each tribe now has a kind of quality to it that they can bring into this relationship with Oil Moed, with the tent of meeting, with the Leviot and the Kohanot. A friend suggested that it's a kind of sfirot arranged again. I also love that they're numbers. So in Toratah, the census is of all male, they call them heads or poles. But now in this reference, we have the army of the women who are coming to do the work of Elohim, receiving the divine through the Father, the divine inspiration through their fathers, and bringing it to the camp of Tisrael.
Yael, can I just for a moment, just because you say this, you've been saying it a few times, and just so everybody knows, when you refer to Elohim with the nun,
Yes.
you at some point give us a bit of an expansion on that.
Yes,
So that.
I love that.
Yeah.
So there is a Kabbalist interpretation of the word Elohim as Eluhem. These are. And it refers to the full first sentence. In the beginning, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. And the reading is that Bereshit refers to the inner space that is firstborn. And it's a directional, the first thing that is created are the six directional coordinates, front, back, left, right, up and down. The N, the Ani, the I is in the center of that. And it has an N, and N means nothing and nothingness in it. In Toratah, the public language, in Hebrew, the default public language is always male. In Toratah, it's always female. So when we talk about multiples or a public, we talk about that in the female form. So Eluhen would reference the female public sphere. And the Eluhen is the ability to discern. And it's also the power of multiplication through similarity. We are able to recognize and we're able to name. This is the power of nature, and this is the whole process through the Chumash is from the concept of human to peoplehood. It's this kind of branching that keeps happening when the power of Elohim is inserted and brought. Another branch is opening, another direction is opening, and it's like a tree. Every leaf is similar but different. Every leaf is unique but different. Every thought we have expands from another thought. And that's why I went with Elohim. Grammatically, it should be Elohot. And I'm still kind of a little bit between them. But at the moment, it's Elohim. Yeah. Does that explain? Anyone has any more questions about that? Okay. So we have the tribes around, each with her quality. I want to say something about the names of the fathers. Okay, and this was a bit of a shock for me too. I sort of knew it in the back of my mind, but when I started researching what to do with Rachel and Leah and Rivka, I knew Rachel meant a mature sheep. I mean, that's a word that is used in Hebrew, in contemporary Hebrew. I didn't know what Leah meant. I didn't know what Rivka meant. So it looks like Leah means cow, and Rivka means a young cow or a noose to hold the animals. It's somewhere in that farm animal area. So, you know, it became par and keves, bull and sheep. And I think that's a big adjustment there, because we have feelings for Rachel and Leah, and to develop feelings for par and keves is a bit of a stretch, but it's just what it is. And I think it says something about the place of women within the agricultural society. But I also think that there's something actually quite beautiful about that in the bull and the sheep, in the par and the keves, there is that kind of power that comes through to bring to the world these daughters that will then carry with them the blessing in which they came through. So actually, I really like it this way. Baleh, Bilha, and Zilfa are also names that their meaning is unknown. ballet, bilha became, I went with ballet because even in the kind of speculation about the word, there's something lesser in it. And zilef has something to do with spilling. These are kind of, they're quirky areas. They're kind of tough corners in this. But the Torah has lots of tough corners. So actually the tough corner makes kind of this, pulls out more effort out of it into this. I love that the numbers now refer to women. We're so invisible in Toratah. And any kind of way to make this visible is really fascinating. I was imagining this structure sort of laying above the traditional structure as the armies in Toratah, and the military armies in Toratah, and then the spiritual armies in Toratah. I want to speak about the center area here a little bit. The part Moshe Rabbeinu, Arona, the high priestess, and the daughters, Marim, the prophet. I haven't fully gotten into that yet, but I spent a little bit of more time thinking about the daughters of Kehat, the daughters of Gerashon, and the daughters of Merarit. And Gerashon most likely refers to Gerasham, the stranger there, or the one who lives there, and it speaks to a sense of distance. Bnot Kehat, Kehat again is a name that is mysterious, but we have in Hebrew the word Kehut Choshim, the numbing of the senses. And Merarit has to do with bitterness, so the sense of smell, taste. So I interpret their role in this kind of spiritual diagram that I'm presenting to you, the role of adapting the intensity of the connection or the relationship between the tribes and the center, the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies. And so for Bnot Kehat are managing the degree of touch or sense feeling between sharpness and dullness. Gerashon, they are managing the sense of distance from the divine, close and far. Merarit are managing or adapting or coiling the sense of flavor, like the honey of the Torah or the bitterness.
Yael, just one moment. Just to clarify, in case somebody needs the clarification, just because so Levi, one of the tribes, Leviah here,
Mm-hmm.
3 children for Levi. Okay, so Kehat, Gershon, Merari, or Kehat, Gerashon, and Merarit are the children of Levi.
Yes.
Okay, and today when we read our Torah portion, we read about the daughters of Kehat.
Yes.
Okay, so just so we have the lineage here, and we know who, just in case somebody wasn't clear about it. So these
Right.
are the Leviim or Leviot that will, and you'll explain what they're doing, but just so we know who these are in the tree, in the family tree. Again.
Great.
Yeah.
So this is, thank you. And Gila has just performed an act of Leviah. She did this kind of a adaptation. So that's what I mean. We can see that, we can find these roles in a kind of a societal structure, but we can also find this internally for ourselves. When are we Dana? When are we Zvuluna? When are we doing a kind of, Bnot Kehat, daughters of Kehat, or daughters of Merarit kind of work? When are we Moshe Rabbeinu? And so this could be proposal for a diagram that is internal or societal. I think it's really interesting to think about that, in terms of community. When do we identify with a particular quality, and how are we surrounding or joining hands to express the different qualities towards Kodesh HaKodeshim, towards the divine, and how are we receiving from those qualities that are managing the intensity? How are we receiving and how are we giving through these qualities? That's what I feel that Toratah can offer. These kind of readings that I basically, what I'm doing is I'm taking the kind of mechanics that I've been introduced to in Kabbalah, and I'm applying them back to Torah to make Toratah.
Can I bring a question that came up here in the,
Yes.
in the chat? There's been a lot of conversation in the chat, and I'm following, and I'm trying to. Okay.
By the way, I like all questions. So even if you feel that you're, bring, even if you have difficult questions, they're all welcome because they're all help us make this more tangible.
Okay, so one question that came up here is, okay, in Reform Judaism, I think generally in Judaism, I'm reading here, I've been told you can learn from Torah, you can interrogate it, you can turn the meanings around in new ways, you can critique it, you can reject it completely. You cannot change the text. Are you, Yael, abandoning too central, too definitional a constraint? And then
What is the, hold on, what is the question at the end?
Are you abandoning to a central, Robert, ask the question. No, I don't need to read it for you.
Yeah, I'm just asking, is this cheating? Is this like this this constraint of not changing the text of Torah seems to be, I don't know, it's a heavy constraint on my theology. It's this thing that I've got to find ways to work around it all the time. Mm-hmm. If I just change the is that somehow making things too easy, I guess? Or in doing this, are we moving too far away from the tradition or something? I don't know. It's an ill-defined question, but
no, it's a very legitimate question. For me, there is no choice. I have to do that because I can't find myself in Toratah. I'm just not written in there. I can't do that kind of building these new relationship with the divine. I can't do them through Toratah. And it's not like I didn't try. I've even tried being religious. I don't find where I connect to it. I love the idea of Chilul Kodesh. What is the word Chilul? Chilul means to make a space. So we're making a space. I'm making a space in Toratah to give rise for Toratah. It also, the root for lechalel also means playing the flute. So there's that kind of musicality to it. That kind of, this was, a restriction that happened at some point within the tradition. It wasn't born that way. Right? Even the tradition of pronouncing the four-letter name, that's something that came along the way. If we are going to sit, if we want a Torah that we all can sit around the table on even grounds, I don't see any other way besides making it even grounds. But also I want to say that it's not as simple, she just changed the names and it's the same thing, but different names. It's not quite like that because I personally would not be able to even arrive at a kind of reading, for example, of the Tisraela camp if I was not able to relate to it so directly. I would not even feel that I have any kind of, certainly not permission. But now that we're in this midbar of a place of words becoming to being and wilderness at the same time, there's a new area of thinking and thought and feeling that is coming directly from the language itself. And I have to say that it's much more potent and felt in the Hebrew, because every single verb is also male or female. I think it also allows, I mean, what is it like for you to hear it in the female form?
Maybe we can open this question up for a moment, and if Robert wants to answer, but then if other people want to, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, I think it's a great time for questions and answers.
Yeah, what it felt like for people to hear.
I haven't read this yet, so I'm just imagining what it's like. But like the story of the rape of Dinah, what's this going to look like when the genders are reversed?
Yeah, yeah. I'm not going to answer it now, but yes, that's a good question. I mean, it already exists. I'm happy to share it with you. And I think there's definitely things to look. Some things, feel, I mean, what about the circumcision? There's that too.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the reading that I bring to Toratah, I mean, we're starting, if I'm bringing Kabbalah to Toratah, we're already starting at the 15th century of Jewish thought, right? We're not starting at the agricultural, we're already reading it as names and characters are understood more as powers in a dynamic system. So yes, what does circumcision mean if we're looking at it that way? Yeah, there's a lot of great questions. So this is how Torah is made through that. How do we make Torah? We make Torah through the conversation, through the asking questions and struggling with the answers. Yes, absolutely. I'm glad that Dean really comes up, because usually Dinah kind of, she disappears so often. Yeah.
Would other people like to share? I see Lauren was writing here something about practicing to read this aliyah that she did. Maybe other people, yeah. So Lauren, if you would like to share about that, if you feel comfortable, and maybe other people would like to share what it felt like to hear and read it.
Yeah, well, my thoughts didn't go much deeper than what I just wrote, to be honest. But I found it really interesting just to try and get my mouth around the new language in a sense, right? And I think it's because reading over and over again with Toratah, like you have like the masculine verb conjugations over and over and over again, and you sort of that's all you hear just about all day, every day, it seems. So it was interesting. In some ways, I kind of felt like it took me a little longer to get around the language in a sense. But when it clicked, it clicked. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And then, I mean, to double down on the idea of slightly problematic stories here, another one that immediately comes to mind for me is how would this change how would this change the Akedah in that sense?
Emrama takes Titzchak, her daughter. Yeah, but now when we have that and we're sitting, Toratah and Toratah side by side, we can have the conversation about, parenting. We can even say, like, what does it mean if Emrama takes Yitzchak or Avraham takes Titzchak? We can have that conversation. Everyone's at the table. Everyone's at the table. Everyone has a voice there that is not hidden. Yeah.
I would love to jump in. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia.
Hello.
Hi, Julia.
Hey, Yael. So I found it very liberating to hear Toratah read. I was both listening for the changes in Hebrew, the ones that I could catch. I was taking in the English translations and found it somewhat revelatory to think about, to hear about Aharona and her daughters, and hear the word Kohenet. which I really know of because of Jill Hammer and the Priestess Institute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about the question that I think, I'm not sure the name of the person who asked it. Robert, the question that you asked in terms of, is this too constitutional a change or too constitutional a shift? And I'm called to think about what in the history of Judaism have been the paradigm shifts that we have adapted to in our 6,000-year history of being a people. And one that pops to mind is the paradigm shift when we were forced, we had no other, there was no other choice but to move from temple worship and sacrifice into rabbinic Judaism, or that's the way Judaism reconstituted itself. And I would perhaps like to ponder or stake a claim to the idea that the shift from a patriarchal paradigm to one of equity is no less groundbreaking and no less of a monumental shift, and that we may be at a point in our society that I mean, this is all just, I'm just sort of saying what I'm thinking, so I hope you'll bear with me, but that maybe that's what we need to do right now in our world. And I'm also thinking about, in terms of too constitutional a shift, like this is the one document that has been revered and is somewhat sacrosanct, but I also personally feel like it can rise to the level of like an idol. And that's the thing that we're not supposed to do. So I don't know how to square those two things. And I think what Yael is doing is, or what Toratah does with Yael as the channeler, perhaps.
Just the channeler.
because I do think, and I know you've said this, but I do think it's like bigger than you. It's like this needed
100%.
this needed to be in the world, and one person can't go up against the Torah. Like this is a collective consciousness that's kind of arisen.
100%.
And I'm glad you agree.
100%.
Because and I see what Toratah does as there, you know, no one document can be perfect. And what Toratah does is break open a horizon of possibility that offers equity, that does not, that offers a vision of equity and allows us to see ourselves as women in different ways and as men in different ways. And then, as you were mentioning, the also what does this mean? It also brings up the question of like, what is the binary and how, you know, where do we exist in between that? So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Julia.
Can I say something? First of all, you know, I had a chance to meet Yael at a Limud in outside of Atlanta, and I really have just been drawn into her project because it's more than just you know, a flipping of genders. It's a real thinking through. I was thinking about Robert's question, and I thought, you know, to me, changing the text would be saying, I don't like that line in Leviticus, I'm going to just cut it out, as opposed to ignoring it or saying, you know, this is not going to talk about my life. And what I love that Yael does is keep the complicated text. It's still a difficult text for a mother to sacrifice or be willing to sacrifice her daughter. It's still a difficult text for what happens with Dean as opposed to Dinah. The level of, you know, the leaving out of the 13th child who happens to be a boy you know, not giving him the place. It's almost like, if I could talk to what Julia was saying, it's not equity. It's just as complicated a question of looking at how the genders play off each other. It's just now, not only are the figures in the story predominantly women, you actually look for the male pieces of it as a kind of missing voice. And God, of course, even though we all know God has no gender, but God is gendered in the text, and we have to say, oh, when we say she, we really mean he or she, right? I mean, it's like there is no, or even more so, the fluidity of gender. There is no he or she. I never, you know, in my own readings, use he or she. I always just repeat the name God. But when you see it in front of you, you realize how much of a barrier that is if you're not the gender that's being used as the marker. And I would just say one other thing is that we commissioned Yael to make a beautiful piece of art for us of the beginning of Shemot. And one of my favorite pieces of it is what, you know, just like we read the beginning of Exodus and we think, oh, isn't this beautiful role that the women are playing? They're the ones who are named. You have the midwives and everything else. But you also, when the main characters are all women, you see that there is no, yeah, that's my piece. I love this piece. That the gender, there's no gender of kindness. There's no gender of cruelty. The Pharaoh is a woman, the Farah. The you know, the one who watches over his sister as she's adopted by a man who takes her out of the river is, you know, is this boy watching his sister. And there's no gender of, you know, we've done that. And when you see it opposite, it is liberating because it is something that makes fluidity possible. But I don't think it's equity. I think equity is not human. I think it's opening an idea to how we live through those challenges. And not every woman is, you know, is a hero in this story, just like not every man is a hero in Toratah.
And I'll just respond to that. When I was talking about equity, I was thinking of it as in totality. When you look at Toratah in totality as another side of the coin of Toratah, and that the shift of balance into a feminine,
sure,
goddess lineage, that there's equity in that shift, in the shift of balance. But I agree that within the text, the lack of equity continues to be, exactly as you're saying, a challenge, and perhaps will open up new, it might allow us to see the lack of equality in new ways, to have the gender balance be what it is within Toratah.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question about this text that you put on the screen here now? I'm just reading it. And ותלך אישה מבית לוויה ותיקח את בן לוויה ותער האישה. Why is it still the woman?
Well, so I kept the women. The women are still getting pregnant.
Okay.
I felt that if we move the pregnancy to men, we're getting to a place that is a bit far from the ability to identify. But I was, for the rest of it, we actually, I also made here the menika a woman, but I received feedback from various sources that asked why can the man not be the one who's nursing? And I'm like, you know what, you're right. So Michael, there's a version 2.0. Yes, where the man, and I was also even introduced to some passages from Talmud where the man grows breasts to nurse the baby. So that kind of like,
yeah,
I call it plasticine, you know, it's this kind of clay, this kind of clay of story and language that is the foundation, and that's in Talmud, the foundation for this work in a way. Why? Because that's how our minds work. Our minds work like that with language. Language is air coming out of our body. The alphabet system is a notation system for how to do that, but it's very, very malleable. And that's really what's amazing about it. And I think what's even more amazing for me is that every time this is introduced to a group of people, new insight comes in, new perspectives come in. So what you're bringing it right now is what makes it alive, is what makes it meaningful. Otherwise, it's just, you know, bits on the computer.
Torah is the life through limud. So once we start learning it, that's how we give it life. We breathe life into her. So to that, thank you. There are a few more questions. Audrey, would you like to ask your own question, perhaps? You wrote quite a long question, and would you like to share?
Yeah, I would like that.
I was just thinking, as a new person involved with looking at text, that I was wondering if this doesn't fit into a Talmudic project, because, and I just want to put that as an aside, but I thought that, I said, does not Yael's intention to find a place for herself in Torah represent what Julia calls a paradigm shift from a patriarchal perspective to one of inclusive and equitable interpretation? Because our present collective situation or consciousness has moved away from the patriarchal and tradition through the feminist perspective. So that's sort of what I...
So I see two things. I mean, these works are really like visual midrashim. They're in the way they're organized, they're a commentary. So for example, the outer circle is Toratah. Toratah is a basket, or, you know, a cradle for Toratah in the middle, rising up, helping her, you know, come up, bringing it. And it's also reflected in the story itself, where it's the brother and the son of Parah that are the care givers for Moshe. Right, so this is really a visual midrash, but the text itself, in its kind of raw form, is the source material. So, for example, I have a friend. She took the first 4 verses of Bereshit from Toratah and wrote a song to it. So I think of those files that I shared before, the source material. They need to be available to everyone as Torah is available to everyone. And from there, you know, the Midrashim can come, the Talmud can come, whatever we need, the Musar can come, whatever we need for it to evolve and to be able to answer a question like, what is that? What is the legacy that we are giving our daughters? Which is not a question we're used to answer within this context. And of course, what is the legacy we're giving our sons as well? So the way I approach it, I look at, my question is, how are these stories form our worldview privately and in a community or society? How it informs our world now, and what is that we want, what is the legacy we want to hand over to the future generations? That's the position that is mobilizing this effort. Yeah.
Thank you. Toda. No. So just so many questions. So I'm just kind of going through, and Meital, would you like to expand on your comment on Torah being, the word Torah being female? Or do you want to?
I might be making like a linguistic mistake, but I thought Torah is a feminine.
Yeah.
I was thinking also the Torah shel Toratah, it's like the term of the Toratah. So I'm just thinking it's funny that it's been related in a feminine way always in Hebrew, yet as we know, I also identified that I felt very excluded from everything which is inside the Torah besides the name.
So yeah, if you put like a little dot and the last letter, the hey of, it becomes her turn. It literally means her turn.
It could also be an interesting piece of art. Mamash, it's our turn now, Nachon. Judith wanted to ask a question, and then Lauren had some question about go back because Lauren had a question about the colors on your artwork, but Judith had a question first that she wanted to articulate.
I don't know if I have a question formulated clearly enough yet, but I mean, I think it's pretty amazing what you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm intrigued by the idea that the comment, though, from Rabbi Bernstein as well, and others acknowledging it, that this is still a difficult text, right? I mean, there's the aspect of gender, which on the surface seems, problematic. It is problematic, and then you flip it, you get into it, it gets even more problematic, all the decisions you've had to make. And the gendered part is interesting because I think it, anytime you shake something up, you have to reflect more about, something seems unfamiliar and you're forced to look at something, right, differently. So in and of itself, it's a wonderful process to make us more aware, right? But my question, I don't know, there's no question here yet. There's the question of, like people said, it's still a very difficult text. And I always felt, as not being a native Hebrew speaker, maybe I felt more alienated from the storylines than I did from the gendered part, because I wasn't dealing with the gendered language. I mean, I did feel that all the time. I was aware of it all the time, but I'm still more distanced from the storylines than I am even based on the gender. And then I just want to say the part that I'm really awestruck by is the visual graphics representation of the text, whether it's the Toratah, to me, it's almost separate. I mean, I'm sorry to say, almost separate issue. Like, I think I would love if you had been able to engage with the text as it originally was. I'm not saying that would have been better, and you had applied all this, which you couldn't have because you wouldn't have been motivated to do so, I understand. But I think it would have been mind-blowing in and of itself, that's all. Okay. And also the question is, if we change it, you're talking about a legacy, then if we change a lot of this, it should be changed over and over again. It's so much late for different times and different perspectives. And, we get into that whole problem. And I'm not arguing for not changing it at all, but we have to admit that we get farther away from a core text that binds practitioners all over the world, and that I worry about in general, because we have the dissolution, the falling. Do we have to stick by some patriarchal form of a Judaism just to be, and some stuck in the mud version from Orthodoxy just to have a common text? I don't know. That seems like a dumb idea too, but it's a thought we have to acknowledge in the back of our minds. Okay.
Thank you. So I want to say something. First time I read Torah in English, I was shocked. It felt to me that I just lost about 70% of the meaning of the text. It became just a story. But for many people, the translation is the text. The translated text is the holy text. For example, in the Bible in English, translated, the King James translated from the Greek and the perhaps Aramaic versions. You know, and what is a translation? A translation is an attempt to take meaning and pass it from one body to another, except that it was done only through the male line, right? So, you know, you could, if one needs, one can explain to themselves Toratah as a translation of moving a meaning of a text from one body to another, but now we're going across the gender form. Perhaps, you know, that's, you know, a way to sort of maybe, I mean, for me, it's a spiritual text because now I can do this kind of spiritual work through it, which before I wasn't able to. But we can also talk about that way. And how much changes within translation? A lot changes. You can't do this whole, I mean, even the first, for example, and I love that, I'll show you something that happens in the first sentence of Bamidbar. I think it's this one. Yeah. So here it says, and Tehovah spoke to Moshe in Midbar Sinai. I kept Midbar in the tent of meeting on the first day of second month in the second year after they came out of Egypt, saying, we go to the Hebrew. The Hebrew is right here, and says, "V'tedaber Tehovah." Tedaber means spoke, but you have the daber, the Tehovah el Moshe b'midbar. Tedaber b'midbar ba'oel. So we have spoke in a place, in a tent, which is the whole beginning that locates the place. And from moed, which also means meeting, but also means time, oel moed, the tent of meeting, tent of time. And then we get the whole other part of it that relates to time. This is really this beautiful poetic thing that happens in the Hebrew text, but kind of disappears in the English text, right? And the meaning of all the names. All the names become people, where they're more like characters or qualities in the Hebrew form. So, I mean, what are we gonna do? That's, you know, that's the kind of, so the benefit of the translation is that it enables meaning certain aspects of the meaning to transfer to other people, other tongues, but things are lost. So I don't, you know, I think it's in the same territory. It feels to me that we're in that same territory. But I think that with Toratah, we gain more than we lose. I heard, I forgot her name and I apologize, the rabbi who runs Svara Institute, Bet Midrash, and she was talking very eloquently about the Judaism as evolving. And she said, you know, in 100 years, the Judaism we're going to have in 100 years may not be recognized by us today. And I think, you know, Judaism before Hasidut was very different. And what a hoo-ha that was when Hasidut came to be, and people were fighting and were killing each other, you know. So that kind of transformation is part of what keeps a, you know, an evolving tradition alive. I think it's inevitable. I think we have to find our female side of our society, our feminine side of society has to find itself in its spiritual practices, because at the moment, I think most women are experiencing a kind of what I call a spiritual gender dysphoria. It's a dislocation. If we run out and we're going to run for office and we're going to do all the things we need to do to help evolve our societies, we can't go to our synagogues and churches and have only one channel for our inner spiritual life or imagination. That's how I see it. So I think that it's inevitable. It needs to happen. It's time for us as a society to go there, to be there, and to create the language. And unless it's written, doesn't happen. It has to be written. This is how our minds work. When it's written, it becomes law. It becomes something we can all refer to. It's not enough to think it. Kol ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. Every action has a thought that's in beginning. This is really basic at how things become what we call real. And I know that from making art. I know that. So one of the first thing I did after I did, I think, maybe a third of Genesis, is I contacted Julie Seltzer, a soferet stam, a scribe who writes Torahs. And I said, I need you to write a chapter for me. Just write chapter 2. I want to see if I feel the same kind of feeling when I hold a Torah scroll. Okay. I can show. Did you see
Can you
that?
share the picture of that, please?
Yes. I'm going to show that to you. Yeah, here we go. This is my website. Here we go. There we go. So I received this in the mail. And I go like, wow. Yep. From this to imagine a full Toratah and scroll that we can take out on Shabbat with Toratah and have a relationship with, it's not hard to imagine. And in fact, I did the first aliyah we did was with Lab Shul during the Jewish, the Gen Network, Jewish Emergent Network, a group of centers and synagogues that are kind of part of more the renewal movement. We did an aliyah that was both from Toratah and Toratah, line by line, Hebrew, English. And Lab Shul was really brilliant at creating a floss scroll for me. It was just, the Tzei Chaim with just a piece of fabric, and Emily was there. Rabbi Emily taught me and was there with me, and she was doing the English. And that moment when you have all the pieces of the ritual there, and we did the aliyah, and I raised the scroll, and these are the things that make our spiritual life feel real. It's just the way it works. So do we, bringing up that, what Julia said about Pesel and Tuna, where is the holy? Is it in the ink? Is it in the parchment, which is a skin of, I think, a pre-born, an embryo of a sheep? Where is the kedusha? Where is the holiness? Is it in, the writing? Is it, we need to be able to have some flexibility in where we're located in order to expand this envelope as we move forward into the new forms of reality, the way they introduce themselves, the way Elohim introduces it to us at every given moment. I don't have within me, I'm not born with a capacity to worship. I'm not a worshiper kind of person. So everything that is suspect to me that I start to think of as pesel and tuna, I immediately reject it. And it also includes the imagination. So I say it's not here, but can I build it in the intention? Can I build that feeling of awe, not even in my intention? I'm looking for the feeling of awe between us. That's where I'm looking for it. Between us coming together and each of us expressing their experience of life, their expression of the Elohim as it's presented through each and one of you that's where, for me, Kedusha is. This is the Oel Moed. This is the place we come together. This is the place we can bring a prayer and a hope for. What is that imagined reality? What is imagined future that we want to prepare now so the future generations can have? This is where I located. And that's why I feel, maybe that's why I have this inner permission to come and do that, arrived. If you told me 10 years ago I would be doing that, I would think that you're pretty crazy. You know, this is not something that I think it's weird to even imagine to do that. But it came, and once I saw it, I knew it wasn't for me only. I mean, it's not something you even are allowed to keep for oneself. It has no use for only myself. It has to be communal.
Hi, Yael, תודה רבה. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
We need to wrap up because it's already 12 here. Keep this on the screen for a moment.
Okay.
Keep this on the screen for a moment. There are many more questions, and the chat was very active. So if you're okay with people can contact you on Facebook probably.
Yes, absolutely. Contact me on Facebook.
And
100%. I love the questions. They help this grow.
Yeah, video, as we said, this is Limud Torah, and it's very important. And I love that, and specifically I wanted this to be on the week before Shavuot, because first of all, it's Bikurim. It's the first fruits. And so we're doing a Bikurim here together, and that's beautiful. So thank you very much. And also, I said before, it's like we're in House Sinai again, and everybody was at House Sinai, and everybody heard Adonai's words through their own ears, through their own ability and intentions. So I think this is bringing more of Adonai's words that were at Har Sinai and just putting them l'chtav, okay? The Torah Sheba'al Peh has become ktav. The oral Torah has become ktav. So this is quite wonderful. So toda rabah. And I just to close here, I wanted to read the first paragraph you wrote because it's part of the Kiddush for Shabbat, right? It's part of what we say for Shabbat when we say the blessing. So just to close, I'd like to sing it for us in the tune for Shabbat that we do. As another practice, and as a kiddush for this day, for this gathering, and for this Shabbat morning. ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבעם, ותיכל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתה אשר עשתה, ותשבות ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתה אשר עשתה, ותברך אלוהים את יום השביעי, ותקדש אותו, כי בו שבתה מכל מלאכתה, אשר בראה אלוהים לעשות.
Ooh, amen.
Fun?
I want to say thank you. Wow, this was amazing.
Okay.
I will next week. I'm doing Tikkun at JCC Manhattan. We're doing, and I'll be we'll be looking at we'll be meeting Moshe from the Teor, the place of light, the river of light. We're going to climb with her to Mount Sinai to receive the luchot, and also we'll work with her to make them again, to actually create them. Mm-hmm. And we'll say goodbye to her on Mount Nevo. So this is going to be next week on Shavuot Tikkun. If you are, hanging out at home and you want some, more of this, that's I'll be there. So you're welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for being here, and to everybody who was here. Just one announcement for TBO, for Temple Beth Orah members. On Shavuot, so it's actually going to be next Shabbat. Oh, my dog is sneezing. Slicha. So on Shabbat right after Shavuot, for Shachrit, we're going to do a Bikurim ceremony. Okay, we're going to do a special Bikurim ceremony. And we invite everybody who would like to share something new that they had done this year. Any new creations, new babies, new books, anything new that you've done and you want to share and say thank you for, we'll bring this all into our Bikurim ceremony. So just contact myself or Paula or Bert. Shalom Paula, toda rabah, and we'll say thank you for all that we have. So, תודה רבה, Yael, for being here.
תודה רבה, גילה. Thank you so much.
ממש wonderful. ממש wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody who joined, and I hope everybody has a wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. תודה רבה.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah, thank you again.